Meta stock. Meta Platforms, META, the ticker symbol, shot up today. But I wanted to break down the financials to show that it's undervalued to begin with, still, even though it did move up, Meta stock did move up much higher today. Let's jump in. I want to show how Meta stock is undervalued versus some of the other stocks out there, especially the higher flying Magnificent Seven, as they call it. Let's jump in. I'll show you the financials and why I think Meta stock is a strong buy. If you're just joining me for the first time, thanks so much. Make sure to hit that like and follow button. I'm an economist first and foremost, and I break down the economy broadly speaking to show how it will affect the stock market, then individual stocks. At the same time, I'm also a value investor. And I want to take a look at, this is a chart on Meta Platforms, Meta META being the ticker symbol. Wanted to break down why Meta stock is undervalued relative to other investments and why it would be a strong buy. Now, as you can see, we had a pretty big kind of jump higher. In late October, we got earnings announcements, and Meta stock, of course, shot up a little bit off after that, but sold off. A lot of stocks did sell off throughout October, then back into November, there was a rally. So we've seen that, but there was a dip, and now things are moving back upward. Still, even though Meta stock has outperformed in the latest charts, it's still undervalued. Now let's take a look. Here are the latest numbers. Q3, of course, printing 34.1 billion for the quarter. Projected revenues is what I really want to take a look at. Analysts updated their projected revenues, and this is really sort of the genesis of why I wanted to put another video out on these guys. I had looked at Meta right around 300 and said it's a buy. Now it's about what, 345 or something like that. 2024, 150.6 billion. I think it's 5.59 is the actual number. This was a move slightly higher. With that, metrics moved up a little bit more, and Meta stock is expected to be slightly more profitable. Cruising through the margins, gross margins 81.9%, operating margins 41.5%, and net margins, a nice little pop here, 33.9% for Meta stock. Price to earnings ratio. When you look at the bigger players here, sometimes you see numbers triple digits, price to earnings. Meta stock is below and trailing. It's sort of the laggard of those bigger stocks. It's been a laggard. There were some issues before that Meta stock or Meta Platforms management did address. They had heavily invested in 2020 all through COVID into the future, didn't see the returns they were looking for, and costs really ate into profits. Of course, they sold off sharply at some point. Management came in, cut a bunch of staff, and since then things have been moving upward. But what's happened is it's still lagging the rest of the bigger players. Earnings per share for Q3, 4.39, not bad, 4.39. But looking into 2024, 17.28 cents. This is what we're really going to focus on. And we start with the US 10-year Treasury. This is the benchmark investment. It's trading about 3.95 today. It dropped down to about 3.85 after the yield sold off or pushed lower. Yield doesn't actually sell off. Because of the Federal Reserve last week saying that they think they can do 3 cuts next year. Yield might have dropped a little too much, bounced back up. Not sure the 10-year will hit the 4% again, probably, but we'll see. We do have economic data coming out this week. It is probably the key economic data when it comes to inflation that the Federal Reserve is going to be watching, and that's the PCE inflation deflator. Now, I caution anybody who sort of holds on to that number as dogma. There's more to inflation than just inflation. The big thing is, and if you look at some of my previous videos, I did a video over the weekend on inflation and housing. As it turns out, the big chunk of the inflation gains we saw was housing. Housing spiked up about Housing spiked up significantly, and it represented 70% of the increase in inflation. Problem with that is simply this. If mortgage rates continue lower, individuals are going to start pushing back into the housing market, and this will push price back upward. So I'm not on board with the 2% thing that the Federal Reserve all of a sudden thinks they can target and hit for next year. Use that as a cautionary note. But with regard to Meta, of course, more than likely, yeah, they'll probably hit that 17.28 earnings, but the Treasury yield may sort of narrow the differential between that 5% and what is now 3.95%. Nonetheless, you start with that 10-year Treasury yield as your benchmark. Then you ask the simple question, can you outperform it? In this case, the yield on Meta stock, buying Meta stock even today after the big kind of move higher, we are printing at 345, could have picked it up at 320 just last week. Of course, at the beginning of the year, and you can actually see the huge move downward and then back upward throughout 2022 and into 2023. What will Meta platforms do in the future? Given the yield is higher than your benchmark, and given that Meta platforms is underperforming, say, Apple, Microsoft, and a couple of those others, you can expect that Meta platforms will likely catch up to those, which means there's going to be some solid upside. Given the $17 future earnings per share, you could almost see 400 easily throughout 2024. And if they do hit that, that's a pretty decent 10% move, for a little more than 10% for Meta stock itself. The way I do my value investing is I start with a benchmark, and Warren Buffett does this as well, just for the record. You start with that benchmark, and then you try to outperform the benchmark. You find stocks that are undervalued based on that. You look at the future earnings, you look at current price, and you go from there. I could see 400 easily hitting in 2024, given all things equal, that the Federal Reserve doesn't have to step in and train wreck the economy, because, and I do believe, their comments last week were a little too soon. We've already seen some of the other governors kind of doing pushback already. Maybe that's why the 10-year popped up a little bit. We'll see. Nonetheless, make sure to hit that like and follow button if you're into the breakdown of the entire economy, how that affects the broader stock market, and of course, value investing, looking today at Meta stock. We'll see you in the next video.